So there's not usually conference realignment that happens that really catches you off guard, that makes you think like, whoa, hey, this is outrageous. This is ridiculous. I didn't expect that. And it's not all that often that there are conference realignments that make you have other questions that make you think like, well, wait a second. And I guess it's not completely unexpected because UMass had been a football-only member of the Mid-American Conference before, and it didn't work out. So they broke up, and it was better for all parties involved. But UMass is apparently rejoining the Mid-American Conference. And my very first reaction was like, well, whoa, wait a second. That kind of came out of nowhere. That The Athletic reported it. The college football world took it and ran with it. And I was like, yeah, actually, this is happening. This is UMass is going to join the Mid-American Conference. And I don't know that there were a lot of people that were super prepared for that because there hadn't been a whole lot of scuttle about it. There hadn't been a topic of conversation. The MAC hadn't been really viewed as a conference that was looking to expand, especially in an all sports capacity. So I guess when I first saw the news, there were kind of like three immediate questions for how this all shook out, what happened, etc. So the first question I had was, why make this move? Why decide like, hey, now is the time for UMass to join the MAC. Now is the time for the MAC to expand. So why make this move? I think my initial reaction to this story is, and it feels like far-fetched, but I can't figure out why else it would happen. The first thought when why make this move is because UMass doesn't have a path to the college football playoff as a independent. Now, to be frank, I think they have a very slim, frail, on its last legs chance to make the college football playoff in the Mid-American Conference. But they have justifiably a chance to make the college football playoff inside a group of five conference if they are in a group of five conference. You have to have been one of the highest conference champions to have a chance to make the college football playoff. So the pathway does exist inside the Mid-American Conference. It's not a 4-lane highway. Like that path is not an easy path to navigate for UMass in the college football playoff landscape. Like, not only is it going to be highly unlikely that the Mid-American Conference is on the reg the highest group of five rated conference champion, but UMass hasn't really put together a resume that would lead you to believe that they are going to be an immediate contender in the Mid-American Conference, let alone an immediate contender in the Mid-American Conference when it is viewed as the best group of five conference. It's just generally. But otherwise, what else does, like, you broke up once before. You had decided, the Mid-American Conference and UMass had decided, like, hey, this isn't working out for us. It's not working out for you. Let's go ahead and break up. So why make the move? I think it's because, one, UMass didn't have another likely college football conference destination. Conference USA did not appear to be an option. Neither did the American Athletic, especially after the American recently took Army. So when, and I think as a football program like UMass, like, for instance, Notre Dame as an independent has a path to the college football playoff, an expanded 12-team college football playoff. They don't have to join a conference to have access to that. UMass does. UConn is going to have to join a conference to have any hope, any prayer of participating in the college football playoff. Army going to be in the same boat. So I think you might see the college football independence really start to wither here over the course of the next. And I think you've already seen it, where you went from UMass, UConn, Notre Dame, Army, New Mexico State, Liberty, down to Notre Dame, UMass, UConn. Like you have to, if you're not Notre Dame, you have to join a conference, because you're not going to get the benefit. Like now, if maybe like, and it's not going to happen, but a few years ago when it seemed as if the Big 12 was on the brink of being swallowed up by the Pac-12, and there was that standoff, and Texas got the Longhorn Network. If Texas had said, hey, we're going to be an independent, then yes, they'd get the benefit of the doubt. I think even if Stanford had said, we're going to be an independent, they probably would have got the benefit of the doubt and they would have had access to the college football playoff before somebody like UConn, UMass. But in an expanded college football playoff, where there is a path to somebody from the group of five, it's going to be one of those 12 teams participating for a chance to win a title. You can't afford to not be in a conference, because you are telling recruits, you're telling your boosters, your fans, your university, your athletic department, we are the only program in America, or the only one of 2 or 3 programs in America that don't have a possibility of winning the national championship this year. Now, in reality, there are anywhere from some years 1 to some years 10 schools that can actually win the national championship. But on paper, to start the season, if you are not in a conference in the expanded college football playoff, you do not have access to win the national championship, no matter how great you are. So why make the move? UMass needs a conference home. One, from a college football playoff access standpoint, from a scheduling standpoint, because now, in the past, there had been New Mexico State and Liberty and Army and UConn to fill up your schedule. Those teams kind of just played each other because they had openings in the schedule. Now those spots have withered. Now, it would have been difficult. Like UMass would have filled their schedule with FCS schools and all of those things, but your schedule is difficult to fill out when there is now a complete lack of independence, except for you and UConn. So that's question number 1 of the 3 questions that made me think, like, well, wait a second, what? The second question is who benefits? Who benefits from the decision to have UMass join the Mid-American Conference? I think one, obviously, is UMass. UMass having an expanded opportunity to make the college football playoff. But I think that might be it. I don't know how the MAC benefits from this relationship unless it's going to continue to add. And we'll chat about that in a second. But I don't see how schools like Ball State in Northern Illinois, in Central Michigan, benefit from adding a school in Massachusetts to a super compact league. The MAC had a lot going for it during the conference realignment, because that is a bus league. That is a road trip. You are not spending money on flights conference, because you can get from one end of the conference to the other in 8 hours. And so it worked really well. And now everybody in the MAC is going to have to get on a flight to go play UMass, which is going to add to the budget, which is going to add to everything. Your expenses are rising exponentially. Every year you have to go play UMass. Your hotels, your meals, charter buses, flights, all of those things are now increased because UMass is in the conference. At this level, there is no like, oh, well, they're going to bring the Boston market and not the crappy fast food chain. They're going to bring the Boston TV market to our conference. Well, no, they're not. Nobody cares about UMass football. And when your conference deals are like ESPNU, ESPN2 on Tuesday nights, and CBS Sports Network, having UMass in your conference portfolio doesn't do a whole lot for you. It just doesn't. So for every sport, now that the basketball teams are going to have to fly to UMass, it adds money to the budget. It does. So who does it benefit? UMass in football, pretty much only. And if you need it highlighted that football drives everything in college sports, it's this, that UMass is joining the MAC to have access to the college football playoff, that they weren't going to have a path. They weren't going to be joining the American Athletic Conference. They weren't going to be joining Conference USA. So their hand was kind of forced. I think they kind of like being in the A10 in basketball. Now the A10 is now the A18 or whatever in basketball, and it's gotten a little bit geographically spread out where UMass is now, like St. Louis is in the Atlantic 10, Dayton is in the Atlantic 10, Loyola Chicago is in the Atlantic 10. So they've had some flights to begin with, and they're dropping down. Not only they're dropping down from a multi-bid college basketball conference to a one-bid league in the name of football. In the name of football for a program that has not ever been historically good on the FBS level. So that shows you that football is driving the bus in college athletics. And then the third question that I have, and it might be the most interesting question and the most difficult to prognosticate, is, will the MAC keep expanding? Is UMass the end? And my initial reaction is no, of course not. Because now you got an odd number of football teams. But then on the flip side, there was that heavy flirtation between the MAC and Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee State. Now, I don't expect Middle Tennessee State to see UMass joining the conference and then be like, you know what? That's it for that. That's going to seal the deal. We're going to the MAC. Like, I just don't. They viewed their spot in a more Southern-focused league that we get a lot of out-of-state students from schools from states around us because we play in Conference USA. Western Kentucky was kind of driving the boat for Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee State joining the MAC. There was a report from Kyle Rowland from the Toledo Blade basically saying, hey, the MAC remains interested in Western Kentucky, and Western Kentucky remains interested in the MAC. So, will the MAC keep expanding? I think you need to answer two questions. One, does Western Kentucky have the berries to leave Middle Tennessee State behind in Conference USA and join the MAC? I think eventually, because Conference USA is a house of cards built by just a smattering of schools that I don't know that they want to be looped together, but they are looped together. You've got one private school in Liberty that is highly controversial, with a bunch of public schools that the enrollments in those public schools range from 60,000 to 9,000. So there are some disparities there, and there are in Kentucky, Texas, New Mexico, Tennessee, Louisiana, Virginia, and Alabama and Florida. So they're sort of all over the place. Western Kentucky is not far from Ball State. It's not far from Miami of Ohio. It's not far from the Ohio schools. Western Kentucky is really kind of like South Central Kentucky, and it's easy to get to on the freeway. You don't have to fly. If maybe Central Michigan and Buffalo will have to fly to Western Kentucky, but everybody else can drive. So, does Western Kentucky have the berries to leave Middle Tennessee State and leave Conference USA behind? I would say, yeah, probably. And if that's the case, then yes, the MAC will continue to expand and add UMass and Western Kentucky in what seems as if a ridiculous pairing expansion is like, hey, what are the two schools you would pick? Do you think that the Mid-American Conference is going to expand with? Like UMass and Western Kentucky, baby. You wouldn't put that on. That wouldn't be the combo. But then if Western Kentucky isn't willing to expand, for all the reasons that we talked about with question number one of you got to have a path to the college football playoff. Does UConn want to join the Mid-American Conference in football only? Does the MAC want to have another football only member? It hasn't worked out all that well in the past with Central Florida and Temple and UMass. It hasn't been well received inside that conference. Is UConn a bit of a different animal? I think if you can turn it on into a bit of a Notre Dame type thing and not a, we're going to let you win our football conference, but like, hey, we're going to let you win our football conference, but 3 of your non-conference games in basketball and men's and women's basketball are going to be against schools from our conference, and we will rotate who gets to go to UConn or if you come to our schools, because having the UConn basketball brand, if UConn men's basketball team has to play a game at Toledo, if UConn's women's basketball team has to play a game at Ohio, if you say, hey, in odd number years, we'll send 2 schools to you, and even number years, you'll play one. I guess that's the same thing. If we'll play 2 games at we'll send 2 teams to you, and you come to one of our schools once every year, men's and women's both. It doesn't have to be the same school every year that the men's and women's are going to play at Northern Illinois or whatever. But you have all the leverage because UConn needs you. You can bend them over a barrel. Like, hey, if you want to potentially represent us in the college football playoff, it's going to cost you a couple of basketball games every year. And you can use that to your advantage, then go for it. But in the past, the football-only members in the MAC have not worked really and been well received. So that's the question that I question the most. Will the MAC keep expanding? I think yes, because you're going to have an odd number of football teams. But then also, our Conference USA or the American, like obviously the American doesn't work for UConn. They left the American. So your options are Conference USA, the MAC, or independence. You can't be independent anymore because if UConn goes 12-0, are they going to get in the college football playoff? Maybe not. And what's the chances UConn going 12-0? But can UConn go 9-3 or 10-2 some year in the MAC and be the highest rated group of 5 school? Potentially. So you got to have access to the playoff. It has to exist. And so I don't think it's outrageous to think that maybe UMass and UConn are a package deal into the MAC. Now, UConn, like UMass, UConn is easier to get to than UMass. One, it's a little closer, but then also you can fly into New York and bus to UConn if you have to. You can fly into Hartford and bus to UConn if you have to. It's not bad. Where I think Amherst is a little bit more like you fly into Hartford and then bus a couple of hours. You fly into Boston and bus a couple of hours. So it's a little bit different. And UConn is a bigger brand name than UMass is. But you have to be able to use that to a like, hey, we have to make this work for our basketball teams too. So you're going to come to one of our schools every year, and we're going to send 2 schools to you every year or whatever to beef up the MAC basketball slate. Then like, hey, you know what? Like if you want to come to Eastern Michigan, we're going to play UConn this year. That's a cool thing. Cool. Or UConn's coming to us. Sell some extra tickets. Sell your building out for once in a while. There's a win-win there for everybody. It's just finding it and finagling it. But those are the 3 questions that I immediately have when it brought up that UMass is going to join the MAC. I find it interesting. I find it fascinating because it's not, to me, a natural fit right off the bat. It has that same kind of like Stanford and Cal are joining the ACC feel to it. Like, oh, it feels like putting kind of your left shoe on your right foot. Does this feel right? No, it don't. We'll see how long it takes to take that shoe off. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all that great college football content that we're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. Goes a long way in helping out the channel. We'll be back at it tomorrow. I'll see you then here on the Daily Huddle with Saturday Glory.